The air inside the apex wing of the obsidian tower wasn't just temperature-controlled, it was psychologically controlled, designed to be thin and cold, suitable only for the kind of ambition that required no human warmth. This vast, silent floor, paved in black marble that reflected the city lights in shimmering, impossible patterns, was the sanctuary of the untouchables. Here, the conversations were about restructuring continents and acquiring dormant gold mines, carried out beneath a glass dome that made the struggling world outside look impossibly distant and small. Every detail, the scent of rare wood polish, the low hum of proprietary financial servers, the effortless drape of a suit worth a year of median wages, screamed one word: exclusion. Sarah Jenkins stepped onto that floor and instantly became an anomaly, a visual error in the system's flawless rendering. She was 45, the lines around her eyes earned from 25 years of rising before the sun, her body moving with the quiet efficiency of someone whose presence was defined by her absence. Her uniform, a practical, faded charcoal, was the camouflage that had kept her alive. A maintenance badge, pinned slightly askew, was her invisibility cloak. Today, however, she broke the rules of her own survival. She had walked in at 10 a.m., high noon for the power brokers, a time she was strictly mandated never to occupy the apex wing. Her hands, usually calloused from gripping industrial mop handles, were tucked tightly into her pockets, concealing a slight tremor that betrayed the immense, impossible weight of the promise she was carrying. The effect of her entry was immediate and devastating to the room's composure. Conversations, a heated debate about a controlling stake in a European energy firm, snapped shut like a steel trap. The suits turned as one, their faces registering first confusion, then the slow, toxic crawl of superiority. They didn't see a woman, they saw a stain, an administrative oversight that needed immediate correction. A powerful woman in a lavender velvet suit, known for her merciless takeover strategies, lifted a diamond-encrusted hand to her mouth, not to hide a yawn, but to muffle a laugh so sharp and cruel it was meant to draw blood. Sarah felt the heat of their collective, condescending gaze. 100 watts of arrogant contempt focused entirely on her thrift store shoes and the stubborn set of her tired shoulders. She forced her feet to move, one after the other, across the miles of gleaming marble she knew better than her own cramped apartment. Her destination was the counter, a barrier of polished titanium and granite that looked less like a reception desk and more like an altar to wealth. Behind it sat Marcus Sterling, the head VIP account manager, a man barely 30 but carrying the accumulated entitlement of 100 years of inherited fortune. Marcus was everything the tower represented: sleek, effortlessly cruel, and utterly convinced of his own divine right to privilege. He looked up, and his forced smile, intended for a client, curdled instantly into a look of profound irritation as he recognized her. "Can I help you, Sarah?" Marcus asked, drawing out her name with a slow, patronizing emphasis that felt like chalk scraping slate. He didn't use first names with the service staff. The familiarity was a calculated insult, a reminder of their unequal positions. "The maintenance closet, if you recall, is down the hall on the service level. I trust you haven't forgotten the protocol for the crystal display cases? We can't have fingerprints on the baccarat, can we?" His eyes flicked pointedly to her worn, sensible shoes, implying she was a physical threat to the room's aesthetic perfection. Sarah met his gaze, refusing to flinch. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in the silent, pre-dawn hours while scrubbing the very spot where he now "Saturday, sir," she said, her voice quiet but carrying a surprising, unyielding resonance that momentarily cut through the room's ambient hum. "I'm not here for work. I need to log into my account. I was told, specifically, to come to this exact floor and speak with a manager." She emphasized the word manager, a subtle but firm rejection of his attempt to dismiss her as a mere employee seeking a locker key. The silence returned, more charged than before, a deep, expectant vacuum. The ridicule escalated. Mr. Harrington, the aforementioned merger titan, a man whose net worth could change the GDP of minor nations, stepped closer, adjusting his gold cufflink. "Your account, dear," he boomed, a theatrical, disbelieving laugh following immediately. "Up here. This is the Apex account wing, cleaner. We manage sovereign wealth funds and generational trusts. We measure our minimum deposits in the 8 figures. You'll find your employee savings plan, if you even have one, at the public branch, 3 blocks east. His elegant wife whispered loudly enough for the whole room to hear. Perhaps she found a discarded lottery ticket in the trash. The laughter rolled across the room, a collective, arrogant wave intended to drown her in shame. But Sarah Jenkins had survived worse things than contempt. She inhaled slowly, a deep, measured breath that belonged to a seasoned fighter, not a scared maid. "My late employer instructed me to come here," she repeated, her voice rising in volume, refusing to be muffled by their disdain. "He passed away 2 weeks ago, and he said the instructions for the account would become active only at this location at this time. I have the legal documents and the login credentials." She pushed a worn, transparent plastic folder across the counter. It slid slowly across the polished granite, stopping precisely at Marcus Sterling's manicured fingertips, a defiant statement of fact against an ocean of prejudice. Inside the folder, visible to the watchful eyes of the surrounding elites, were documents sealed with a legal ribbon, a recent death certificate, and a small, tarnished silver key nestled amongst the papers. Marcus picked up the folder with a palpable air of disgust, as if the plastic itself were contaminated. Late employer. That detail arrested his flippant attitude for a brief second. Death was real, even in the apex wing. But the irritation went out. "Fine," Marcus sighed, shaking his head at the surrounding crowd, playing the put-upon servant of the wealthy. "I'll humor this absurdity. Let's see this imaginary account, and send you back to your duties, where you belong. Probably some petty gratuity fund." He pulled up the secure terminal, his movements slow and theatrical, fully intending to turn this into a final, humiliating spectacle for his audience. Marcus Sterling began to type the complex account number, his fingers moving with practiced, disdainful ease, completely unaware that he was about to unleash a financial shockwave that would shatter the foundations of his entire world. The anticipation in the apex wing was now a physical entity, a tight, nervous knot. The elites, having finished their performance of mockery, now settled in for the denouement, ready to enjoy the spectacle of the maid's small, embarrassing balance being revealed. Marcus Sterling, smiling a superior, patronizing smile, entered the complex account number from the legal document, the last 3 digits followed by a letter, a format usually reserved for the highest corporate tiers. He then turned his attention to the 12-character password. As he typed the final digit, the computer screen, the glowing gateway to the financial universe, did not immediately display the expected summary. Instead, the customary light blue interface violently snapped to a stark, high-security red and white. A blaring message, stark and impossible to ignore, pulsed across the monitor in an urgent, capital font, "Accessing Legacy Vault Protocol. Standby. Authentication required." Marcus froze, his patronizing smile dissolving into a look of sheer physical terror. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, suspended in disbelief. He tried to override the protocol, using his manager credentials, typing the access code twice, 3 times. Each attempt was met with a jarring rejection. His hand began shaking uncontrollably, forcing him to pull it back from the keys entirely. The crowd, sensing a breakdown in the system, murmured, the low buzz of their confusion replacing the aggressive silence of their contempt. Mr. Harrington, the merger titan, pushed closer, his silk tie nearly touching the counter. "Marcus, what in the devil is this? Is the network compromised? What's Legacy Vault?" Marcus couldn't form a coherent word. His eyes were glued to the complex account sequence, a number he had only ever seen referenced in obscure, 40-year-old internal memos concerning the Elias Vance Trust. A trust whispered about by the oldest partners, a colossal entity that had been dormant, legally untouchable, and utterly legendarily massive. This wasn't a bank account. It was a ghost of foundational wealth. He looked at Sarah, the cleaning lady, and then back at the screen, a horrifying realization dawning on him. This isn't a savings account," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. "This is Elias Vance's protected trust." The words hung in the air like poison, shocking the onlookers into a deeper, more profound silence. Sarah Jenkins, however, remained unervingly calm. She placed her hand over the transparent folder, protecting the silver key inside, the key her employer, The man she knew as Elias Vance had given her. My employer was Elias Vance, she stated clearly, confirming the unbelievable. He was my only friend in this tower. He passed 2 weeks ago. He told me the account would be activated the moment I came to this specific counter. Her quiet certainty was more devastating than any panic. The name Elias Vance, the silent co-founder, the genius strategist who had seemingly vanished decades ago after his son's mysterious death, sent a jolt of genuine fear through the financial veterans. The room's reaction was now pure, unadulterated terror mixed with insatiable greed. Marcus Sterling, no longer arrogant, scrambled backward, his chair scraping loudly across the marble, a desperate, screeching sound of self-preservation. I need security. I need the CEO. Get Mr. Harrison here now. His voice was high-pitched, panicked, a stark contrast to his earlier composure. He rushed into the back office, leaving Sarah isolated but strangely protected by the immensity of the secret she carried. Harrington and the other elites, now recognizing the potential magnitude of the assets, began to circle Sarah, their previous contempt replaced by a cold, calculating desire to gain proximity to the new center of gravity. Minutes later, the head of operations, Mr. Harrison, a man who had weathered financial scandals with an iron backbone, burst out of the back room, his face pale and deeply etched with concern. He bypassed the entire crowd, walking straight to Sarah. "Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice carrying the immense weight of the tower's history. "We need to speak with you privately. This is no longer a matter of an account balance. This is a matter of corporate security and your personal safety." He gently took her elbow, steering her toward the heavy, armored oak door of the executive conference room, the inner sanctum. As the door clicked shut behind them, sealing Sarah away from the ravenous crowd, the tension immediately multiplied. Inside the sterile confines of the conference room, the air felt thick, heavy with the weight of decades of buried secrets. Sarah sat at the vast mahogany table, her small frame dwarfed by the power suggested by the room's decor. Across from her sat Mr. Harrison and the newly arrived figure, Ms. Linda Chun, the tower's most ruthless and successful corporate attorney. Ms. Chun, a woman with thin glasses and an expression of constant, unwavering control, opened a thick leather briefcase, pulling out a single, heavily sealed manila envelope. "Miss Jenkins," Miss Chun began, her voice professional but carrying a subtle undertone of relief that Sarah was finally here. "Before we open this, we must clarify one detail that is paramount to your understanding of this entire situation. The man you knew as Elias Vance, your employer, was also the man who put his own life on hold to protect you. Elias Vance was your biological grandfather." Sarah Jenkins felt the world tilt. The old man who taught her quiet dignity while she cleaned his office, who insisted she address him formally in public, was her blood, the last bastion of her family. The immense confusion and sudden surge of grief were almost crippling. "But why the disguise?" Sarah whispered, the question a raw, agonizing cut. "Why make me clean my own family's tower? Why this life of being invisible?" Miss Chun leaned forward, placing the sealed envelope on the table. "Protection, Sarah. Absolute, total protection. Your father, Elias Vance's only son, found out about the scope of the trust when he was too young to understand the enemies it created. He was a brilliant man, reckless in his youth, and the people who wanted Elias Vance's wealth, the people we call the Shadow Council, silenced him. They made it look like a tragic accident, a massive market loss. Elias realized that the moment his fortune became public, you, his only granddaughter, would become their next target." Mr. Harrison finished the harrowing explanation, his eyes grim. "Elias Vance had to make you a ghost, Sarah. A cleaner on the payroll, someone known to exist but culturally, systemically unseen. You were the last person anyone would ever suspect of being the heir. For 25 years, that uniform was your armor, your invisibility cloak, the only thing that kept you safe from the very wolves who are now circling outside that door." Sarah stared at the table, her hands trembling. She wasn't just a maid who inherited money, she was the last surviving link to a dynasty, protected by a veil of profound, systematic self-denial. Her entire humble life had been an elaborate, successful act of survival. Miss Chun gently broke the wax seal on the manila envelope, the sound sharp and final in the high-security silence. Inside was a lengthy, thick, handwritten letter from Elias Vance himself, an emotional testament that felt heavy with the weight of a dying man's love and regret. Miss Chin began to read, her voice steadying as she relayed the profound instructions. My beloved Sarah, if you are hearing these words, it means you have faced the system and chosen courage over fear. The money is not the inheritance. The choice is the inheritance. I had to choose to hide you. Now you must choose to live. The atmosphere in the room shifted. This was no longer a meeting about finance, but a moment of familial legacy and ethical testing. The lawyer then pulled out a separate, stark document, a confidential threat assessment report filed just days before Elias Vance passed. They know the trust has been activated, Sarah. This is the moment the Shadow Council has been waiting for. They thought the immense wealth would pass to a faceless corporate shell, allowing them to quietly control it. They will not accept that you, Miss Jenkins, the cleaner, are the new key. They will come for the legal documents, the key, and ultimately, they will come for your life to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs. Mr. Harrison nodded, his face pale with urgency. The physical security of the tower is safe, but the world outside is not. They will leverage every legal, financial, and illegal means at their disposal. They believe this legacy of power belongs to them, not to the hands that clean their messes. The tension became a physical pressure in the room, focusing entirely on Sarah. Miss Chun, with chilling formality, continued reading the founder's final instructions, outlining the 3 paths that now lay open before her, each defining a completely different future. Option 1, the throne and the target. You may take immediate, full control of the entire fortune. This grants you overwhelming power. You can change the world tomorrow. But it instantly makes you the most exposed target on the planet. You will be rich beyond measure, but you will never, not for a single day, be safe or private again. Every conversation, every move, will be monitored by those who tried to kill your father. Option 2, the fortress and the future. You may lock the entirety of the wealth, invest it, secure it under deep legal protection, and mandate that it remains untouchable and hidden until you reach the age of 50. The world will not know what you possess. You will be allowed to live your life, grow, study, and choose your path safely, knowing the full weight of the funds is waiting for you. You will trade immediate wealth for time and safety. Option 3, the freedom and the finality. You may legally reject the inheritance entirely. Walk away from all of this. Keep your life simple, free, untouched by danger or the crippling greed this wealth attracts. In this case, the Vance Foundation will liquidate the assets and anonymously support philanthropic causes. You remain free, but the opportunity to define your destiny is passed on to others. As Miss Chin folded the letter, a sharp, decisive ping came from the high-security monitor, a sound that cut through the silence like a knife. The loading bar vanished. The system was now fully authenticated, fully connected, and fully ready to display the final truth. Before Sarah could even process the weight of the choices, the conference room door handle rattled violently, aggressively. A heavy, thunderous fist slammed against the oak door, making the heavywood vibrate. Mr. Harrison, open this door immediately. We know the legacy protocol is complete. It was Mr. Harrington's voice, raw, demanding, and utterly stripped of his earlier refined elegance. The controlling assets are tied to the founding fund. We demand immediate legal access to the heir and verification of a transfer. Miss Chen's head snapped up, her face turning a terrifying shade of ivory. They're not waiting for a subpoena, she hissed, urgency spiking her voice. Harrington is being used by the Shadow Council to force this. He's risking everything, because they know the window is closing. They're here, Sarah. Marcus Sterling, who had followed the others into the private room and was now crouched near the wall, let out a choked, desperate whimper. He looked up at Sarah, tears streaming down his face. $5 billion, he sobbed, clutching his head. I mocked her. I insulted the legal heir to the entire firm's stability. I'm ruined. The immense psychological trauma of the revelation had broken his arrogance, replacing it with pathetic, self-pitying terror. But Sarah, though visibly trembling, found a strange, terrifying calm. The fear outside the door clarified her thoughts. She realized the greatest threat wasn't the number on the screen, but the profound, overwhelming greed of the people outside, people who were used to winning every game. "I'm ready to see it," Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm, overriding the adult's panic. "I'm ready to see the balance now. But I need to do the final choice immediately after." Her decision to confront the truth, even with the siege happening outside the door, silenced the room. Miss Chen nodded, her respect for the cleaner now absolute. "Then let's move forward." With a practiced motion, she spun the monitor so that the screen, glowing with the final, absolute number, was displayed to Sarah Jenkins, the woman who had spent her life invisible. Total protected consolidated assets: $4,831,902,125.77. The nearly $5 billion figure didn't just appear, it exploded onto the screen, a blinding white light of staggering, untouchable wealth. Mr. Harrison staggered back, covering his mouth. Marcus Sterling let out a cry that was instantly muffled by the thick carpet. Sarah stared at the number, but what surprised her wasn't the amount itself. It was the strange, quiet calm that settled deep in her core. She remembered her grandfather's words, "Money tells a story. Your heart decides how it ends." The number was terrifying, yes, but the choice, the legacy of dignity, was everything. The entire Obsidian Tower, the financial world, and the predatory council were waiting on the final decision of a cleaner, and she knew exactly what to do. The number burned on the screen, an inferno of zeros, but Sarah Jenkins remained the still, calm eye of the storm. The thunderous pounding on the oak door intensified, Harrington yelling threats that were muffled but clear, threats of lawsuits, board reviews, and catastrophic financial penalties if the door remained sealed. Mr. Harrison, sweating profusely, pleaded with Sarah. "Miss Jenkins, please. We have to call the tower's private security. We need to execute a choice now to legally protect the assets, or the council will move to freeze everything. Your decision must be immediate." The crowd of billionaires, stunned by the sheer, undeniable reality of the name Vance Jenkins, gasped collectively. Their contempt was instantly pulverized, replaced by a sickening, profound realization of their mistake. They had laughed at the single most powerful figure in the room. Sarah continued her steady walk, her eyes locked on the counter where her ordeal began. Marcus Sterling, still pale and shaky, was trying desperately to appear busy, rearranging papers on the immaculate granite. Sarah stopped directly in front of him. Marcus flinched, bracing for the career-ending verbal evisceration he deserved. She didn't deliver it. She simply placed the empty, transparent folder, the folder that once held her papers and the tarnished key, onto the counter. The folder that represented the entirety of her humble, invisible life. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet but carrying the final, absolute authority of $5 billion in vindicated dignity. "The maintenance closet key is in this folder. The mop bucket needs rinsing. Please ensure the floor is properly polished for the morning shift." Her eyes held his for a long, agonizing moment, forcing him to absorb the totality of his shame. "You seem to have forgotten the protocol for the baccarat. I trust you won't let fingerprints contaminate the display again." Marcus Sterling, the arrogant VIP manager, nodded meekly, his shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. "Yes, Miss Jenkins," he managed to whisper, using her full, correct title. He bent down to pick up the folder, assuming the posture of service he had always demanded from her. She had used her old role, the role of the cleaner, to redefine his. Sarah Jenkins walked past the silent, humbled billionaires. No one laughed. No one smirked. They stepped aside, their expressions shifting from avarice to a dawning, horrified respect. She was not a millionaire. She was a moral force, a champion who had chosen to rebuild the world from the bottom up. As she reached the massive, ornate elevator doors, she finally allowed a small, tired smile to touch her lips. Mr. Harrison and Miss Chen stood guard until the doors sealed her safely away. Down on the ground floor, she walked out into the cool, rushing Chicago evening air. She stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering glass and steel monument to wealth she had just conquered. She was free of the uniform, free of the invisibility, and free of the impossible weight of a secret. She pulled out her old, battered cell phone and whispered a final, tearful farewell to the man who had loved her from the shadows. "Grandfather," she whispered to the skyscraper, a monument she no longer had to clean. I did it. I kept the promise, and I remember the others. I'll make you proud. And somewhere, deep within the hidden, financial heart of the tower, she felt as if Elias Vance whispered back, You already have my daughter. As she got into her old, rust-colored sedan, the same car she drove to work every morning, she took her mother's hand. Mom, she said, her voice trembling slightly with the new weight of her immense responsibility. The foundation starts tomorrow. We are going to find every single person who feels invisible and show them they were always seen, always valued. Her mother smiled, tears fresh on her cheeks. Then that's exactly what we'll do, Sarah. You lead the way. And that was how Sarah Jenkins' story didn't end with a jackpot and a mansion. It began with a mission, a moral calling, and a powerful choice. A decision that used $5 billion not to change her own life, but to change the lives of the millions of unseen workers just like her. She drove away from the fortune, but toward a new, clean purpose. The world would soon learn that true worth is not what you keep, but what you choose to give away, and that the quietest people often carry the most powerful truths. The cleaner had become the cleanser, washing away the arrogance of an entire financial dynasty with a simple act of profound integrity. Did that moment where Sarah chose integrity over billions, and then gave Marcus the final cleaning instruction, hit you right in the gut? The power isn't in the wealth you accumulate, but the good you redistribute. If this story touched your heart, share it now and comment the word, invisible, to show support for the people who keep our world running.